Welcome, everyone. As participants are joining in, please use the chat feature on the bottom of the screen to share your affiliation and the Indigenous land or territory that you are joining from today, so that we can acknowledge all of the Indigenous lands within and beyond the Great Lakes watershed. Welcome to the Great Lakes Traditional Ecological Knowledge Speaker Series, our final session on bridging knowledge systems for monitoring initiatives and climate adaptation. Before we begin, we would like to provide a brief moment to, again, this is the second time during the course of hosting the series, to acknowledge the heavy hearts and mourning at this time across Indigenous communities in Turtle Island with the news of another mass unmarked grave of Indigenous children, recently discovered at a residential boarding school. 215 children in British Columbia and now 751 more children in Saskatchewan. 966 Indigenous children who were taken from their families and communities and stripped of their cultures and lives, some as young as 3 years old. As a mother of a 7-year-old Native American boy, I don't take for granted the reality that if you were born in an earlier time, he too could have been forcibly taken. There is a Canadian National Residential School Hotline for mental and emotional support. Jessica Dolan will be putting this hotline number in the chat. And we would also like to just take a brief moment of silence before we get started to reflect on this history and what it requires of us in the present. At this time, I will introduce myself and we will get started. Buju Anin Anishinaabe Kwe Naganigo Kwe Zikon Kwe Jinakaz Nigigin Dodem Wikwe Dong and Dunjaba. Hello, my name is Jessica Koski. I am Anishinaabe Ojibwe from the Keweenaw Indian community, which is located on 1842 Treaty Territory in Michigan's Upper Peninsula on the southern shores of Lake Superior. I am participating today from Dakota Homelands in Minnesota in the Mississippi River watershed, where I serve as a regional biologist and program manager for the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs Midwest region. And I'm also an incoming doctoral student at the University of British Columbia. In my current work with the BIA and over the past 6 years, I have served as the U.S. co-lead for the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, Annex 10 Science, Traditional Ecological Knowledge Task Team. After today, Hannah Arbuckle of the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission and a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe will serve in this co-lead role moving forward. The Great Lakes TEK Speaker Series seeks to connect and share lessons across Indigenous communities and increase awareness of the value of Indigenous knowledge and how to appropriately bridge knowledge systems. There's growing appreciation and respect for Indigenous cultures and ways of knowing throughout the Great Lakes region, and that is what we are seeking to enhance through this series. As we are reminded, in the not so distant past, Indigenous cultures and lifeways were severely disrupted across the continent. We are grateful for the remaining knowledge holders and elders in our communities and those dedicated to revitalizing traditional ways of knowing and being that carry so much wisdom for all people on how to live a good life and in balance with creation. The series has been presented by Annex 10 of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in partnership with the University of Minnesota Twin Cities Department of American Indian Studies. And it is co-organized by myself, Andrew Preston, who serves as the Canadian co-lead for the task team, and task team member Jessica Dolan, who is an ethnobotanist on contract with the St. Regis Mohawk tribe in Akwesasne. And she's also a member of the Conservation Through Reconciliation team based at the University of Guelph in Ontario. Now I will pass it to Andrew Preston to introduce himself and logistics for today's session.
Well, thank you, Jessica. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last session in our series. Thank you all for making the time to join us today. My name is Andrew Preston, as Jessica mentioned. I'm a senior policy analyst with Environment and Climate Change Canada and co-lead with Jessica, the Great Lakes Water Quality Science Annex TEK task team, or at least co-lead for the next little while. And I'll say that it's been an absolute pleasure working with Jessica. She is absolutely fantastic. So I'm speaking to you today from Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory, from land covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which guides us towards peace and binds us together in sharing the land's bounty such that everyone is able to live a good life. In addition, I'd like to recall that this land is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and is covered by Treaty 13, an agreement between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit signed over 2 centuries ago, making it possible for settlers to come and live and share the land with those already living here. Before getting started with today's program, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. First off, today's session will run a bit longer than previous sessions, 2 hours rather than the usual 1.5. This is to ensure that we don't rush through things and that there's enough time for a closing address to bring the series to a proper conclusion. In terms of how the session will unfold today, there will be 3 presentations, after which we will move into the question and answer portion of the program, which will last for about 25 minutes. After that portion, Jessica Koski will say a couple of words, and then she will invite Satiokwe Bucktooth to provide the closing address. Everyone has been placed on mute for the session, so to pose your questions, we would like you to use Zoom's Q&A function. You should see the button for that at the bottom of your screen. As usual, we will be collecting questions as they're posed through today's presentations, and we'll return to them during the Q&A portion, so please submit your inquiries as you think of them rather than waiting for the Q&A session to begin. If you want to share other information with the larger group, please use the chat function. If you are posting to the larger group, take care to ensure that you address your note to all participants. For folks that have missed a session or two, we have recordings of all of them, and we will be sending out details on how to access them in the next couple of weeks. So please keep your eyes out for that message in your inbox. Finally, I would like to introduce the moderator for today's session, Michael Dockery. Mike is a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation with traditional territories around southern Lake Michigan. He's an assistant professor for tribal natural resource management in the Forest Resources Department at the University of Minnesota, as well as an affiliate faculty member in the American Indian Studies Department there. Along with Jessica Dolan, sort of the behind the scenes moderator, Mike has shouldered the bulk of the moderator duties for us over the course of the series and has done an absolutely great job throughout. So I'm very, very pleased to hand the microphone over to him one last time. So Mike, over to you.
Miigwech, thank you. Bozo denwe makana kwabmet indigenakas. I'm Mike Dockery. Really nice to be with everybody today. It's wonderful to see all the different nations that people are coming from, all the different territories where people are living, working, and putting their hearts and minds into this work of restoring our connections with each other and with the earth. I would like to now introduce our panelists, and we've got some groups of them, so we'll have multiple speakers at a time. So the first panelist, I'm going to do all of them right now. The first group of panelists is Alicia Jones, and Alicia is a member of the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. She has a Fish and Wildlife Technician diploma with honors from Fleming College. For the past 3 years, Alicia has been working for the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation Environment Office as the lead environmental technician. Her primary responsibility is to help increase the collective knowledge and understanding of the health of the coastal waters throughout the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation territory. Alicia will be presenting with Emily Mansour. Emily is also a member of the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. After studying forestry, Emily returned home to work for the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation Environment Office in 2017. She since has assisted on a number of files, but the last 3 years has passionately worked as an environmental technician for the Coastal Waters Monitoring Program. From April to October, daily fieldwork is completed to assess current conditions and interactions along the coastal waters within the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation territory. While in the off-season, Emily works to expand local knowledge of our shorelines, habitats, and wildlife through visualization and sharing technologies to enhance community engagement and the overall scope of the Coastal Waters Monitoring Program. So Emily and Alicia will be presented together. Then next we have Debbie King. Debbie King has been an environmental technician with the Pays Platte First Nation since 2013. Debbie has been instrumental in linking traditional knowledge with numerous scientific research projects over the course of her time with Pays Platte First Nation. As an environmental technician, Debbie's focus concerns environmental monitoring, in particular source water protection and future impacts of climate change. Debbie has created a source water protection plan for Pays Platte First Nation, Platte First Nation, continuously monitoring the waters of Lake Superior as the source of the community's drinking water, but has also included inland areas with groundwater and soil sampling. Sorry, I just had a thought that I wasn't unmuted on my microphone, but it looks like everybody can hear me. So I will continue with Debbie's introduction here. Debbie has also been involved in numerous projects dedicated to climate change and its potential effects on not only surface water bodies, but also the health and integrity of the diverse ecosystems in the area. This includes researching the area's flora and fauna for changes in habitat conditions and the presence of invasive species in a warming climate. An important aspect of the environmental technician is to advocate to community members of the health of the environment in the area. Debbie has held numerous community workshops with guest speakers from research establishments of all levels of government and experts from universities and colleges. Then we will have Sarah Smith speaking in conjunction with Rob Kroll. Sarah is a direct descendant of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and is the Midwest Tribal Resilience Liaison with the College of Menominee Nation Sustainable Development Institute in association with the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. As the liaison for the Midwest, she works on facilitating stronger relationships between tribes, climate researchers, organizations, and the Midwest CASC, the Climate Adaptation Science Center. In addition, she works with tribes to build capacity and provide support by helping identify gaps and assisting with climate resilience efforts. Sarah holds a Master of Science in Ecology from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and an undergraduate degree in Biology and First Nation Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Rob will be presenting with Sarah. Rob Kroll is a policy analyst in the Division of Intergovernmental Affairs at the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, or GLFWC, where he coordinates the climate change program and provides policy and operational experience to the Conservation Enforcement Division. Sorry about that. That's okay. Molly. Okay, excuse me for my dog barking at the mail carrier. The GLFWC Climate Change Program was created in 2015 with the goal of integrating scientific and traditional ecological knowledges in order to provide a more holistic and culturally appropriate approach to climate change adaptation. As program coordinator, Rob oversees the activities of the climate change program staff, serves as a liaison to tribal, state, federal, academic, and NGO partners, and works directly with counterparts at the 11 GLFWC member tribes. Rob is originally from southeastern Pennsylvania and now resides in the 1842 Ojibwe ceded territory in northern Wisconsin. His educational background includes a BS in environmental studies from Northland College and a Master of Environmental Law and Policy from Vermont Law School. And finally, to wrap up not only our day today, but the entire series, we welcome back Satyaokwa Bucktooth. Satyaokwa is the founder and medicine maker of Snipe Clan Botanicals. After completing a 4-year apprenticeship through the Akwesasne Cultural Restoration Program in the area of traditional medicine and healing, she felt the need to continue her work with plant medicines, and so Snipe Clan Botanicals was created, a business of bringing people and plants back together. Satyaokwa also works as a contractor with the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe's Environment Division as a TEK consultant. With that wonderful group of people, I would like to turn the speaking over now to Emily Mansour and Alicia Jones to start us off. Miigwech.
Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Jones and I'm from the Chippewas of Nawash First Nation. And Ani Minode Indigenous Cause Neashignamingan Donjaba. My name is Emily. My spirit name is Good Heart, which translates to Minode. And I'm from Neashignamin, which is the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nation here on the Saugeen Peninsula. So I guess we'll just get right into it. We'll share our presentation with you guys. Okay. So everyone can see you okay?
Yes, it's
Yeah, so we are the Coastal Water Monitoring Program. We started in 2019 and we've been running ever since. So Alicia can go ahead.
So I'll just start off by just explaining what the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation is and who we are and whereabouts we're located. So the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation is comprised of both the Chippewas of Nawash unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen. So we're located in Southern Ontario, and our entire territory basically includes the entire Saugeen Peninsula, right from the Nathan River extending east over to the Saugeen River. And that's all the green, dark green on the map. And then it also includes all inland lakes and rivers, and then the lake beds from on side to the border, and then over to the Georgian Bay, just to the midway point. And all SON members are members of our Anishinaabe people and are part of the Three Fires Confederacy. So the SON office is a governing body is governed by the governing body is called the SON Joint Council. Joint Council is making decisions regarding projects within the SON territory. The SON Environment Office is a technical body whose staff is to support the SON Joint Council on any key issues related to the duty to consult or any ongoing projects within the territory. And the larger goal of our office is to protect the SON rights or the rights of SON members. This directly is linked to protecting the lands, waters, and non-human beings of our territory. So I'll just kind of get into, so part of SON, we have just different files and file folders. So we have just a bunch of different projects and stuff going on within the SON Environment Office. And the one that we work mainly for is the Coastal Waters Monitoring Program, which was developed in 2019. And it's with a goal to create a baseline inventory of the nearshore habitats and wildlife throughout the SON territory. And the Coastal Water Monitoring Program is used as used in consulting and SON's decision making and the process regarding new and ongoing projects in the territory, so that we can ensure that we can protect our non-human being relatives and understanding the distribution, abundance, and health of the coastal waters throughout our territory. So why we focus on the coastal waters is because it is like immensely important to sustaining life for both humans and non-humans. And like we tend to focus more on like the larger species of fish. So like there's lots of research for like this salmons and whitefish and stuff that people like, you generally see like the larger fish species being more studied, so I guess. And then, so we focus on the small fish that live in the lake and in the near shores, which is important to finding out the health, the health of basically the lake and the ecosystem that is around it. So in each species has, or is important in like the place and creation. So yeah.
I just want to say the middle picture, if you guys can see there, it's my finger. And that's a larval fish that we caught, which was maybe 3-4 centimeters long. So these are really tiny species that we're catching, and they may not look like fish, but they are still very important in the role in creation. So yeah, like Alicia was saying, it is important for us to not only know them and remember their names, but to understand that the roles play in the overall ecosystem.
And then just those photos, there's the eastern newt, and then we have a golden shiner, and I can't see the other ones.
That one was whitefish.
The lake whitefish, juvenile, and then just a painted turtle.
So most of the time our target is fish, but we cannot always control who goes into our net. So we do get some awesome visitors. So that's where you'll see the newts and the turtles, and sometimes birds who like to poke holes in our nets. So we get lots of awesome coming in.
So like just like to focus to why the nearshore is so important is that every fish species uses the like coastal waters or near shores at one point during their life cycle. So for example, the lake whitefish, and it is like extremely important to like our people from Nawash and Saugeen. And so the adult whitefish, they mainly live out in the deeper lakes and use that habitat as their life cycle as the adult. And then during spawning season in the fall, they will come into the near shores and spawn in the shoals and whatnot. And then once they're done spawning, the eggs will turn into the larval fish, what we've seen in the previous photo. And then those fish, or the larval fish, they can't swim, so the currents and stuff will push those into the near shore, which the near shore has plants, material, and just nutrients that the larval fish need to grow a larger whitefish. And so like the cycle just repeats, and once the whitefish are big enough and can swim, then they'll move back out into the deeper lakes. So the coastal regions are vital to the water quality, and mainly because like the wetlands do provide, they're almost like a sponge kind of soaking up any of the nutrients or any like, they're basically a filter for the lakes. So anything coming runoff or anything that we don't want into the lakes, they'll filter through the wetlands. So it is an essential habitat also for the turtle, snakes, and any migratory birds. And the coastal waters do create lots of structure and food for the fish. So just lots of like plant material provides structures, and we have seen with the rising of water, there's more plants and structure for the fish. So we kind of like just made a hypothesis this year that we've caught a whole lot of fish just starting this field season, and we believe that it is from the amount of vegetation and structure that the fish were able to reproduce more and like able to hide from any predation.
Yeah, with all the reclaimed shoreline. Okay, so within our program, we have, I guess, 4 major study components that we complete as of 2019. So fish community is our largest one. We spend more time like staining, and this year we did larval fish sampling, which was our first season, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Water quality, we assess at every site that we set our nets, and we also do yearly sample intake. Water temperature, we monitor all throughout the territory as well as at each site. And aquatic vegetation, we do an intake for every site that we set our FIKE or seine nets. Aside from doing all of those assessments, we also do take environmental conditions. So this is just simple things depending on what the weather is that day. So we're looking at precipitation type, wave height, how much cloud percentage is in the sky, the direction of the wind, the temperature outside of that day. So we're just looking at general weather statements. So one of the biggest things one thing that we do is water quality. So at each site, we're just making sure water quality is a good indicator of who will be using that area, what kind of fish will be using that area without us even setting the net at first. We can kind of get an idea based on our numbers. So one thing, or a couple measures that are total dissolved solids, dissolved oxygen. So that's one of the indicators that will tell you which fish will be using that area. If there's too much oxygen, well, usually there's not too much, but if there's too little oxygen, then you'll know that that's not a good habitat for fish. We do look at pH levels as well as water temperature. When we set the net, we do a surface and bottom temperature just to see the difference. As I was mentioning, in addition to those water samplings, we do a comprehensive water quality assessment once a year. We have about 14 boundary areas throughout the territory. So we're going into each one of those boundary areas and taking a sample to get an overall idea of the analysis of the nutrients. So we're looking for phosphorus levels, nitrogen, metals, and contaminants. Last year was the first year actually that we did that sample grab. So we're hoping this year to do more samples and expand that side of the water quality test as well. We have training coming up this year with Water First, which is a great organization. We'll be learning a little bit more about water quality. So we're looking forward to what we can do with that knowledge and how we can relate it back to the program and to our data. Okay, water temperature is another thing. So you guys can see there, not the most technical thing. When we first started setting them up, I was very surprised at how easy it was. We have that little cinder block, which is what we use, and we just secure it using chain, and then a little piece of plastic, we just shove it in there. So you can see the little orange thing on the bottom, it's called a tidbit, and that's what monitors the water. So that little tiny thing is taking a reading every 30 minutes to see what the water temperature is at. So over, I think last year we had 37 temperature loggers throughout the territory. We left some over winter, some of them we couldn't get, so they had to stay up there, but some are eventually set in areas that we have a higher focus on, like Bruce Power. And typically we set them at 3 to 5 meters. So we're trying to get a better idea of coastal regions as well as in areas where we do set our nets. Some trends that we've seen maybe just from looking at data, maybe once or twice a year, you can see the lake completely flips. The temperature will be really hot, or not really hot, but it'll be high. And then all of a sudden you can see it just drops. So we're looking forward to understanding more of the temperature dynamics throughout the territory and how they could relate to Bruce Power or areas of interest within our territory. Aquatic vegetation. This is an interesting one this year. So for us, or for fish, can everyone hear us?
Yeah, you're back now. I wonder if you mute your video, that might be a way to save bandwidth.
I don't think we don't have a video playing.
No, I mean, there's at the bottom of your screen, there's a little stop video button that does this basically. That might save bandwidth. I've seen other people get through these issues by doing that. Oh no, I think we lost them again. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so, okay, good.
Maybe we'll try that, see if that.
Yeah, try
Can
to.
you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry guys, our apologies. I'm not sure what's happening.
No,
Okay, so for aquatic vegetation, like I was saying, the fish, and Alicia was saying, fish heavily rely on the structure created by the vegetation, but they also rely on for food, refuge, and shelter. So in general, locations with higher vegetation usually from the last 2 years have a higher abundance of diversity of fish species. One thing we've noticed this year actually though is we've set this year we haven't had vegetation at all. We've actually caught some really high numbers. So we're almost changing our hypothesis, or it's something to look at this year is sorry, everyone.
It's okay.
I'll just try to get through this. Okay. Right, so as we were saying, oxygen levels can be affected by vegetation as well. So it is a good thing, but it can be not necessarily good if it's taking too much oxygen. And like Alicia said, we're seeing, last year we saw a huge rise in water levels. So there was a lot of reclamation of coastal wetlands and provided more structure for the fish. So we're wondering if that may have something to do with the high numbers that we are seeing this year because we haven't been setting in vegetation. So these are just things to be considerate of. So you can see here in our map, these are each of the little boxes are our regions. And each little dot on there represents a pike or a seine net. So from 2019 till now, we've set 82 nets, pike nets, and we've pulled 46 seines. In the last 2 years, we've caught 49 different fish species, which is kind of amazing. It's crazy to see actually how many fish there are and how similar they can look. For myself, as you know, I went to school for forestry, so I had no background in fish when I began. So it's definitely been a large learning curve, but it is extremely interesting. And then, yes, since to date, we've sampled 170,000 individual fish. So it has been smelly, but also awesome as well to see all these species. This year was really exciting. We did our first year of larval fish sampling. We've never done that before. I had never even seen a larval fish. They're crazy to look at. So this year, because we just began, we wanted to narrow down our focus areas and make sure that we were getting a good understanding of who was visiting. So we picked 2 priority areas, one closer to Bruce Power and one just down the shore from there, which is called Stokes Bay, which is like the largest embayment on the Lake Huron side. So that's why we chose that area. We figured that's where the fish would be blowing into. As larval fish, they cannot swim, so they kind of are just dictated by wind direction and wave. So we started at the beginning of April, as soon as the temperature was low enough or high enough, and we pulled till June, and we had over 100 tows. So you can see in this picture, here's our boat on the right, and this is the net. It's about 3 feet wide, and it has a little black catcher at the back pretty much. So we tow for 5 minutes, and then whatever comes to the back of the net, we take it out and we take a look at it. We had one sample that we had 88 larval fish in, and then majority of the other ones were like anywhere from 15 to 2. So it did really vary, and you could definitely tell there was like a peak temperature. So it was really interesting to see this year. So basically overall, the Coastal Waters Monitoring Program, we're trying to understand and determine a bunch of things. There's main things that we're trying to look at, which is the current conditions and health of the coastal habitats and wildlife, especially fish. But we are paying attention to, and we measure painted turtles, any kind of turtles that come into our fish, or into our nets. As I was saying, we can't control who we catch when we are setting and feigning. So it's important to pay attention to all the current health and conditions. Obviously the difference in conditions between sites. So comparing not only on the Lake Huron side from Bruce Power and down, but comparing Lake Huron and Georgian Bay and trying to figure out the differences between those habitats. We also look at temperature dynamics within and across the years. So we're looking at where we set our temperature loggers, how the temperature might change, how the temperature might be warmer or not near Bruce Power. So we're just trying to get a better understanding of in general where our temperature is and how it could be increasing or decreasing over the years. We're also looking for potential stressors within aquatic habitats. So when we're taking water quality, we're really paying attention to conductivity, total dissolved solids. If there's anything that seems out of the blue or areas where we see potential for road runoff or damages, we always pay attention. And then of course, we're looking for just general changes that could occur over time. On the monitoring, so aside from collecting data and understanding the coastal regions, it's important for us to just literally be on the land and the water every day. For us, especially Alicia and I are super connected to our territory. We feel the best when we're outside. Even today, one thing, like just being able to drive around, come to work every day. I found a porcupine on the side of the road today, which was awesome. And we harvested from it. And now we get to bring it back to our community and share with others. So it's not just, I mean, like fish is a great example, but like being out in general and being within the territory, there's lots of things that we've been able to see that we feel very lucky. Waters that we've explored that you can definitely tell our ancestors have been there, have fished there. And we were speaking about this morning. It's almost like a blood memory, like that feeling you get when you're in the land and you're exploring your territory. So, I mean, for the simple fact of, for us, that's one of the crucial things is for us to be out there and on the water. Through the program, obviously, when we get to drive around and go to all these different areas, we do get to see things that you wouldn't typically see if you were just going for a drive. So we have encountered some shoreline developments that were a little bit sketchy. We've seen some infrastructure projects that weren't brought to the office. So we just have a better idea of what's going on with in the territory when we're able to explore like that. And lastly, our exploration allows us to gain ecological knowledge within our territory as we collect and interpret our data. So not only are we supporting ourselves, but we're asserting our rights and protecting the environment within our territory and bringing that knowledge back home to our members. So that's it. Alicia and I say thank you. Chimi Wetch, everyone. And we have a video that we're just gonna share for the end. It was a video that I made last winter. It was just to wrap up the 2020 field season. We love what we do. There's so many beautiful moments and such beautiful land. So we really wanted to capture that and make sure that people who don't get to come out and see what we do, or people who don't know about the Coastal Waters Monitoring Program, or people who don't like SON or the Environment Office, we wanted to make sure that these people could get a good feel of the passion that we have for the program. So thank you. We hope you enjoy. And Chimi Kwet.
We as Saugeen Ojibwe Nation members have a deep connection to all of the lands, waters, and non-human beings within our territory. But there is a special connection to the water. We have relied on the water for sustenance and livelihood, while caring for and celebrating it through ceremony and stewardship. This is a sacred relationship, and it's crucial that we uphold our duty to care for and protect our water. Coastal Waters Monitoring Program launched with the goal of building a baseline inventory of the nearshore habitats and wildlife within our territory. This information will allow us to investigate differences in conditions between sites and potential causes for decreased health. Face of COVID-19, we were able to enhance our temperature and water quality assessment. In 2020, we set 55 nets deployed across 14 different regions within the territory. We caught over 40 different species and sampled more than 62,000 fish. In 2021, we plan to begin our field season in early April with sampling of larval fishes in Lake Huron. Temperature, water, and fish community assessments completed in 2019 and 2020 will be replicated across the territory. Several rivers and creeks will be monitored using electromagnetic backpacks, and an additional region will be sampled. The Coastal Waters Monitoring Program is now one of the largest nearshore sampling programs in the Great Lakes. Many agencies and organizations will look to us for the information collected to enhance our overall understanding of the coastal regions of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay.
Wow, that was amazing. I think, well, it's hard not to get really excited, and with all that passion that Emily and Alicia just shared through that video and their presentation. So miigwech for that. I would like to now invite Debbie King to share her thoughts with all of us.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Wow, that's going to be a tough presentation to follow up with. That was a great job. Wow. So as Mike said earlier, my name's Debbie King. I'm the environmental technician with Pays Plat First Nation. And we've been working on some monitoring programs over the past several years. And I think I'll just jump right into the presentation here. Just give me a moment to share my screen. All right. So can everybody hear me okay? Am I good to go?
Yes, you're good to
Okay.
go. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So the program that we've been working on recently is the Protecting Gitche Gumee. First, I guess I'll get started. Where is Pays Plat? A lot of you probably have never even heard of Pays Plat. So we're located 200 kilometers east of Thunder Bay. There's Thunder Bay, and here's Pays Plat. We're in a nice little protected bay here. We have about 80 on-reserve members with a total of about 200. So we're a very small reserve. We started this project in 2017 through Environment Canada and Climate Change's Fund, Great Lakes Protection Initiative, engaging Indigenous peoples in addressing Great Lakes issues. The objective of this program was to conduct sampling of water, soil, and sediments, as well as monitoring on the Pays Plat First Nations traditional territory on Lake Superior. The goal is to establish baseline data to help signal future risks facing native species. We've been successful in achieving funding for the next 2 years. To date, 2 seasons of sampling have been completed with preliminary results. Water, soil, and sediment sampling are what we focus on, and some of the analysis we perform are temperature, pH, conductivity, alkalinity, phosphate, and nitrate sampling. And for other sampling, we utilize Lakehead University Environmental Laboratory, Lowell, for a full spectrum analysis on select samples. And these select samples are chosen by potential high-risk areas. So along the Pays Plat River, where our community drinking water intake is, and some of the high and commonly used areas around the islands that are near us. Here's just a quick picture of one of our youth learning how to use the camera sampler. One of our things that we really try to do is get youth involved in the program. Whenever youth are available throughout the summer, they're more than welcome to come out with us and try and use the equipment, learn how to use it, and just get a feel for it. And plus, being out on the lake never hurts. So by talking to some of the community members, I decided where to do a lot of the sampling. So just here's a little picture of our community, and you can see it's very small. So all along here and on this side of the river, our houses have on-site sewage systems. So one of our concerns is, if there happen to be any faulty sewage systems, are they getting, is that nitrates and phosphates getting in the water? So we make sure we do a lot of sampling on this river. So we go upstream right before the highway bridge. There's a highway bridge here, and then a railway bridge here, CP rail. So we do a lot of sampling in this area. As well, there's a couple creeks that come in to the Lake Superior, and there's a creek here, you can't really see it, but this is our landfill area up here. And there is a possibility that leachate could make its way this way. So we do a lot of sampling on this little river to make sure that there's no excess leachate or other negative feedback. To date, we have nothing. The water is pristine. And then this is just a larger example of what I just showed you. So some of these little creeks, and we do sampling on all the little creeks, especially right here. This is our water intake for our community. So we make sure that we do a lot of sampling around there. So we sample the area along the Pays Plat River for phosphates and nitrates about 3 to 4 times a year during the ice-free season. To date, we've had no adverse results. And this year we were hoping to have access to a Ponar dredge and get some sediment samples analyzed. And since I've done this presentation, we do now have a Ponar dredge. So we will be doing some sampling with that this summer for sure, which is exciting. So when we did the water sampling on Lake Superior, we focused on many of the numerous bays and island shoreline areas, including the source locations for Pays Plat and the neighboring community of Rossport, Ontario's drinking water intake. And again, like I said, we chose these locations based on high use and ceremonial areas. And the water sampling we perform is done either with the camera or grab samples. And again, some of the sampling analysis of the water is pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and then like I said, we send off other samples to the lab for a complete analysis. Here's just another little map, so you can see some of the areas that we've been focusing on around the islands. So this is the Powder Islands, right adjacent to Pays Plat, and these are like very high use areas. Our community members go there to have picnics, shore lunches, they camp overnight, ceremonial uses. And again, here, this whole area is considered the Rossport Islands, archipelago is what it's called. And so we do a lot of sampling in the high use areas of this whole area. Then we also work on soil and sediment sampling. The soil sampling is mostly done with a basic auger type soil sampler. We do have a split core sampler for doing sediment samples. And when we're doing the samples, we note the depths, and pictures are taken to show the soil profile. And then we bag and freeze the samples until they're ready to be shipped to the university where they're analyzed. Some of the analysis we focus on for the soil and sediments are mercury, conductivity, nitrogen, and metals. But again, there's a whole slew of other things that we get sampled as well. Here's just a picture of a soil profile, and then the soil auger. And here's a picture of my assistant last summer doing some sediment sampling with the split core sampler. And here's the results of that. We sent those to the lab, and of course they came back pristine, which is great. So from the results that we gather, we add them to an Excel database as well as ArcGIS. To date, again, no adverse results have been identified. We compare our water samples to the provincial water quality objectives. And for any results that were to ever exceed that, we would note, resample, and take action if needed. The soil and sediment results are compared to the provincial sediment quality guidelines. And as well, we always refer to the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment for guidelines as well. One of the other things that we look at through this program is the habitat and species. So we are also creating a wetland database and documenting both the flora and fauna found in the surrounding islands. Many of the community members from Pace Plat use these islands to gather medicine and perform ceremonies. So these islands are very important to our way of life. With our findings in the past couple of years, and with the aid of the National Conservancy of Canada, we've actually identified several Arctic alpine disjuncts. Some of these include a bird's eye primrose, knotted pearlwort, fragrant cliff wood fern, white bluegrass, tufted clubrush, and narrow false oats. There's a couple pictures. Here's the bird's eye primrose. You can see they're very delicate flowers. And that's the knotted pearlwort. It's just incredible to see these plants that you would never see in this area, that they're only found in the Arctic, and it's just incredible to see these. Again, the North Shore of Lake Superior is actually in a very extreme habitat for vegetation. Much of our shoreline and our territory are rock barren landscapes with cryptogams of lichen and moss with scattered treed islands. Here's just a little example. Just lots of, call it pavement, lots of bedrock pavement on the islands. And then you'll see those little Arctic disjuncts popping up in little cracks and crevices on those rocks. Again, here's just a little picture showing how wildlife finds its way. Like, how could you ever figure a plant would grow in the middle of this rock? It's just incredible. One of the negative things that we do find on our beaches and coastline is these microbeads. They've become to be known as nurdles around here. I'm not sure how they got that name, but these little pellets are from a train wreck that happened several years ago, and train cars full of these beads went into Lake Superior, just west of our community. And they tried to clean it up by using big vacuums and whatnot, but these little devils are still everywhere, and you can just imagine the fish and other wildlife that can consume these. Now I just have a few pictures here of some of the wildlife that we've been able to get pictures of. It's little baby loon. Here's a very strange deformed salmon that I caught, a martin. And here's a moose that we caught on one of our trail cams on one of the islands. This isn't the greatest picture, but there's a huge eagle's nest up here. It's been there for several years. It's about 6 feet diameter right now. There's a little batch of frog eggs. And one of the other projects that I've worked on is a climate change project. In 2017, Pace Plat received funding from Health Canada's South of 60 Climate Change and Health Adaptation Program. And the focus of this project was to engage our community members to share their thoughts on climate change and how it will impact our health. Through many interviews, we were able to achieve many unique perspectives regarding climate change, and we created a database of changes that have been noted over time. And many thanks go to our elders and youth who graciously gave their time to talk to our team about this important topic. So during our first workshop, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. David Pearson join us to discuss the work he's been doing over the years with the North of 60 First Nation communities. Dr. Pearson is a climate change specialist out of Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario. And if any of you have ever had the chance to meet him, you'll know that he's just a great person and his experience is unfathomable. His renowned work with First Nations enabled our community members to feel very comfortable in opening up and sharing knowledge with him. And through that first workshop, we had a graphic artist draw up some posters for us while the workshop was happening, and things that we've talked about in climate change and heat waves, drought, forest fires, what's going to happen to our property, how much is it going to cost us to replace these items, support the research. And I think the main thing here, we are all interconnected. During the session, we had breakout sessions that Dr. Pearson had posed, and then we had kids draw, the youth draw on their rocks that we gathered, some of their thoughts regarding climate change. And this was a great exercise because it got the kids thinking, and plus we were using these nice stones and pebbles rocks from our coastal area. Some of the findings that we found from this workshop, some of the observations about weather is that weather is more unpredictable now. There seems to be more ice storms. There seems to be more winter rainstorms, more extreme weather, more severe storms and winds, and lower snow amounts or larger snow amounts, unpredictable winter precipitation. And some of the observations about the land, water, and wildlife is that the water levels are really fluctuating. So this year they are very high. And this was several years ago, but Lake Superior is still very high compared to past years. The bay did not freeze over, which is very unusual. Our area of Lake Superior, all our inland bays do tend to freeze. So the fact that these bays aren't freezing anymore or as often is disturbing. One comment was that the bush is denser and growing in. You have to look for berries in new locations, maybe less blueberries. And a very common one was that the water is getting warmer, the fish are going deeper, they're harder to catch. And it's a health impact if we can't harvest as much fish as in the past. So over the next 3 years, we collected over 50 interviews with community members, which enabled us to create our own unique climate change adaptation plan. This is in progress, but we're almost complete. And like I mentioned earlier on the other, on the ECCC project, we always try to incorporate our youth into these projects. So again, we make sure we take our youth out on the land and utilize the sampling equipment. And sometimes we had them do their own panels too. I had our summer student just do interviews with the youth, which was very interesting. You get the youth out on their own without adult presence, and to hear what they come up with, it's very interesting. And a couple of the youth that were involved in this program, were able to take another program through another source of funding and actually became environmental monitors in our area. So I just wanted to talk quickly about traditional knowledge and how I incorporate traditional knowledge into these programs, into these projects. So things that I always try and keep in mind are like the hundreds of years of distrust makes working together difficult, you know, like the Indian Act. We mentioned residential schools at the beginning, which is just atrocious. Ongoing racist policies and a general ignorance of Indigenous people's rights and treaties. I just want to say quickly, Mike said at the beginning, I began work in Pace Plat in 2013. When I first started work there, even though I'm a band member and I'm from this area originally, it was very difficult to build that trust. And I'd say it wasn't until 2017 where people in the community were actually really opening up to me and sharing with me and seeking me out, and which is great because I'm getting so much information now. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of trust for elders to feel comfortable to share knowledge, not only with me, but with the researchers that I bring in. So being patient, be honest. I found those items were key. So things that I've learned over the past several years is that the information gathered needs to be shared with the nation's members. And this information needs to be shared in such a way that it avoids science jargon and acronyms. From what I've noticed, it's the middle-aged, us working folk, people who are bookended by our youth and elders. So we're here to care for both age groups. We need to teach our youth to care for our elders. And we need to listen to our elders to avoid making the same mistakes they did and learn how things were. So things like animal behavior, weather. So yeah, our elders and youth are very important to our nation members. They need to be involved in a meaningful way. You know, we have to have our elders participate, watch what they are doing and take their advice, and have the youth perform the grunt work so they have a participatory learning experience. So throughout the course of these two projects, we incorporated traditional knowledge in many ways. We did a lot of interviews. We had a lot of group discussions through workshops with both elders and youth to pass down the knowledge, going out on the land with the elders, and mapping and learning areas to avoid, especially areas like unmarked graves, certain ceremonial sites, and archaeological sites like the Puckasaw pits that we have in our area. Many times we incorporated TK with Western science to achieve the data vital to the successful completion of our projects. And we work closely, excuse me, we work closely with our TEK keeper to ensure the knowledge that is shared is protected and treated the proper way. So my final thoughts, respect the worldview of the First Nations. It's not hierarchical. We're part of a whole, and we are here to do no harm. Everything's related. A change to one thing is going to impact the whole. And we don't have theories or hypotheses. We observe change, we mitigate the factors that are causing that change, and we pray and we listen to our elders. Chimigwich.
Wow, that was great as well, Debbie Miigwich, for sharing that. As I'm kind of compiling folks' questions and my own questions to get us rolling, I felt like you were answering all of them throughout your presentation. So if I ask a question you've already answered, please bear with me there. That was just a great presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, great. Now I would like to call Sarah and Sarah Smith and Robert Kroll.
Yungo Mike, Sigus Kwawiku, Sarah Smith Jungiats, Oniotiaga Ni'i, Okale Wakwaho Nuvagadaloda. So hello everyone, my name is Sarah Smith and I'm from the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin. I work as the Midwest Tribal Resilience Liaison with the College of Menominee Nation and also with the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. And I'm here today with my colleague, Rob Kroll.
Bujuni Jibimarazi, Robin Dijinakas, Gwinin Damascene, Philadelphia Dunjaba, Anishinaabe Waking Indad, Glyphic Indanoki. My name is Rob Kroll. I'm the Climate Change Program Coordinator for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. If you're not familiar with our agency, we are an intertribal natural resource agency. We work for 11 Ojibwe tribes that ceded land to the United States government in a series of treaties in the mid-1800s. And we help them preserve and protect and implement their off-reservation treaty rights in the land that they ceded to the United States. We're here today to talk to you about the Debugging Jigadeg and Anishinaabe Ejitwad Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu. Let's see if I can get my slides to switch here. So I get questions often as a non-tribal member, why do I introduce myself in Ojibwe-Moan? And there's a number of reasons. One of the missions of Glyphwic is to interject and integrate Ojibwe culture into everything that we do. And as we know, language is the foundation of culture. Also because there are concepts that don't translate well into English from Indigenous languages. And we'll see this as we move further on into the presentation, but I wanted to mention the title of the Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu. As we were finishing up the work back in early 2019, we wanted an Ojibwe title and also a Menominee title. We never did get a Menominee title, but we went and spoke with one of the elders that we work with, and Tribal Climate Adaptation Menu doesn't translate into Ojibwe. But the title that he gave us, Debugging Jigadeg and Anishinaabe Ejitwad, roughly translates to doing something the Anishinaabe way, or as he explained it, it's actually going back to those old ways and those original ways to help us move forward into the future. With that, I'm going to ask Sarah to tell kind of the origin story for the menu.
Yeah, so the origin story begins back in 2017. So NIAX, which is the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, hosts workshops with their different menus, such as their forested watershed menu. And at these workshops, they ask people to bring projects in. And so a group of people brought in a project that was really focused on wild rice restoration. And so during this workshop, they used the forested watershed menu, and they realized that there was this need for adaptation knowledge, but also Indigenous knowledge as well, including culture, perspectives, value, and language. And so from 2017, this idea was born to create a tribal adaptation menu and incorporating these needs for Indigenous perspectives in these adaptation menus. And so a lot of the The other menus, include Western science and this more resource-centric perspective. And so when we were working on creating this tribal adaptation menu, it was really important to include all parts of Indigenous knowledge. And, working between tribes or working with tribes and non-tribal partners as well. Next slide. And so the menu team is very diverse. All the authors are in the circle that you see there. And we came from many different backgrounds. So some of us came from intertribal organizations, colleges, federal agencies, very diverse author team. And during this planning process, it took us a little bit over 2 years to create this menu. And that was very intentional. We didn't want to rush into things. And because it wasn't based on a grant, we had the time to do so. Next slide. Oh, and I'll pass it to Rob.
Unmute. There we go. So before we think about the menu itself, we want to think a little bit about how climate change will affect tribes. And that effect is disproportionate. The effects to our tribes and First Nations are well beyond any input that the people had into what is causing climate change. And we recognize that. We also recognize that people who practice a subsistence lifestyle are going to be some of the most affected. As you can see in this photograph, we have people out harvesting manumin, birch bark, wawaskeishi, maple syrup, walleye, all of the culturally important beings. But really, I'm going to let one of our Ojibwe tribal members talk about this in another way, in a way that better than I could ever explain it.
2 weeks before it freezes is when the tula bees hit, and they run until it freezes during that 2-week time. So if the climate change makes this 2-week thing start 2 months ahead of time, a lot of my people back in the day are the ones of us that like to do this are going to get messed up big time. Climate change did that. The walleyes, the northerns and suckers, if they don't see them things up there when they're supposed to, that messes up all the way down the line somewhere, huh? What was the other one? Them 4 times and snow comes. If it only comes 3 times now, a lot of these stories that we tell in Chippewa country to our children to help relate these things, I become a liar, or maybe a bullshitter, whatever you want to say. When I try to explain something to them in a good way that'll give them life, they're going to believe me. You're telling me you're going to do this 4 times, but you're wrong. But my grandma and grandpas before them, they know this. And that's why they're still here, because they didn't have no weatherman, TV, or radio to do these things I show you. So that's how climate change, what I see about it, it affects our stories. It affects when we hunt, where we fish, and it has a great deal of effect to us.
So that was Carmen Butler from St. Croix Ojibwe Nation. He was interviewed by my colleague Melanie Montano, our TEK outreach specialist here in the climate change program at Glyphwick, as part of our ongoing vulnerability assessment project. So as Sarah said, why do we need a tribal climate adaptation menu? Again, it's because language and perspective and values matter. In the bulk of the NIAX menus, they start off straight out with science and management. As you can see on the right side of your screen, this is the first of the strategies and tactics of our menu. And it begins with consulting cultural leaders and community members and elders And I really like the way Debbie spoke about using that in her work, because it fits right into the way we looked at this. Another thing, again, as we talked about, is language. So from the forest adaptation menu, one of the strategies dealing with invasive species: prevent the introduction and establishment of invasive plant species and remove existing invasive species. And then an approach: eradicate existing populations or seed sources of invasive plants through physical or chemical treatments. Very top-down management, very confrontational style. The concept of invasive species is actually something that the adaptation menu team spent an entire day talking about and trying to get right. And it's one of those terms that we had to take to the elders to try and get more perspective on. And the term that was given to us to refer to these beings is Bakan Ngozi Gaandadak, which is non-local beings. With the understanding that while they may have a negative impact on the communities that they're in, they didn't ask to be brought there. They're simply acting to their original instructions, doing what they're meant to do, but they were brought there by humans. And while we may need to control them or work with them to moderate their effects on the community, they're not the enemy. And we want to try and avoid thinking about them that way. So in our tribal adaptation menu, a strategy is to maintain or improve the ability of communities to balance the effects of the non-local beings. And one of the approaches may be removing existing non-local beings after communicating with the beings in the area to explain your actions. And Sarah.
And so in the beginning of our tribal adaptation menu, we wrote up these guiding principles that's very unique to this menu. And these guiding principles are a framework to integrate Indigenous and traditional knowledges, culture, language, perspectives into the adaptation planning world. So these principles help provide some general guidance for non-tribal partners working in Indigenous communities on climate change. The guiding principles are written from an Ojibwe Menominee perspective, but it's intentionally designed, just like the entire menu is, to allow other tribal communities to integrate their culture and their language and customs in as well. And so the focus is, empowering tribal nations, restoring our language, our culture, our sovereignty into this adaptation planning world where climate change is affecting all of us. Next slide. And so when we're thinking about adaptation, we want to be thinking about our relatives. This is a very different perspective from Western management, where they're seen more as resources. And so decisions for our relatives were originally communal decisions that was made with respect, acknowledgement, reciprocity, and today's management isn't like that. It's very top-down, made by individuals, agencies, or institutions, without that respect and reciprocity for these relatives who are our elders and our teachers. And so this menu really reflects those perspectives throughout the adaptation planning. And so we have had 5 TAM workshops since January 2019. And so our menu wasn't published until later in the spring of 2019, but we did have an initial workshop back in January. And so these workshops were hosted by a tribe, and you can see the different communities there. And our last workshop was actually in March of 2020, right before the pandemic hit us really hard. And that was over by Bad River in Wisconsin. And so just like how the NIAX workshops happened in the past and currently as well. We ask people to bring projects to work on in the different workshops. And so everyone you see here are the facilitators and the participants. All right. And so for the workshop, it still follows this process that's used in the other NIAX workshops as well. So first is to define your management goals, and then assessing your climate impacts, evaluating your management objectives, identifying adaptation approaches, which is where the TAM is used. And then the last step is monitoring or evaluating the effectiveness. And so these TAM workshops are usually 2.5 days. So the first day is really a deep introduction into the TAM itself and into the guiding principles, and then working through steps 1 through 3. Day 2 is really focused on step 4, so identifying those adaptation approaches. And then the last day, which is a half day, covers monitoring. What does success look like for your project? And some of these projects that are brought to us, a lot of them are very natural resource focused, but others might be more educational. And so what does success look like for you? And we do that within the last day of the workshop. And so during this process, this is kind of what it looks like. So throughout the entire workshop, all the things that we are covering and the worksheets that we're doing really leads up to the poster you see on the right. And people can get very creative, and we encourage people's creativity to come out in the process as well. And so it really talks about, what their plan is or their projects, what their objectives are, and going through that process on, which adaptation strategies and approaches are we going to be using. And then once all that's done in their groups, then we open it up for a larger discussion with the rest of the workshop, where they can also add their inputs as well for the different projects. And so we like to keep these workshops relatively small, about 30 people at the most, that we have a lot of great communication, and everyone's able to share their ideas during the process. So far, we've had 35 projects that have been brought to the TAM workshops, and these dots represent some of those projects and where they're located. And so the TAM itself is pretty much, Midwestern, Northeastern focused on the different approaches and strategies that we have in there. However, like was mentioned earlier, this menu is very adaptable. And so we've had projects from Oklahoma, from Florida, come up and use the menu as well. So even though we don't cover things specifically like sea level rise, the menu is still able to work in those scenarios as well.
I'll just talk a little bit about some of the projects that have gone through the workshop process. First one is actually our first completed TAM workshop project. And actually, surprisingly, it's not from within the Midwest area, but it's actually, it was brought to the first workshop we did in Cloquet by a tribal biologist from the Iowa tribe of Oklahoma. And it's just a small project, rehabilitating and restoring a 1/4 acre wetland on Iowa tribe trust land. The area was originally used for education and outreach. The initial goals for this project was to provide habitats for amphibians, migrating butterflies, pollinators, providing a water source for wildlife, education, outreach, and recreational opportunities for community members. And as we helped Yvette worked through the process, she saw that some of the challenges that she was going to be looking at were changes in seasonal precipitation, erratic weather patterns, intense heat and drought. And through the process, she was able to use the TAM to come up with strategies to primarily increase community engagement in the project, bring in native plantings, particularly wetland plants and medicinal plants, and then really use the area for education and outreach for tribal members. And it's turned into a really good asset for the tribe. And then here's a sneak preview of a project that should be finished up later this year. And this project was brought to actually 2 workshops by Kathy Techman. I know a number of the folks on this call know her. She works for Wisconsin Division of Extension and works with a number of tribal nations, really strongly focused on place-based climate adaptation. She was contracted by the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore to integrate traditional ecological knowledge into climate vulnerability assessment that was done by the National Lakeshore. As her project evolved, it went from kind of a physical interpretation project with signage and things like that to where it's something that's going to be completely virtual. Going to be using Ojibwe TEK and the TAM applied to the findings of the vulnerability assessment to promote climate stewardship, kind of for everybody, all of the people that come to the islands, whether it's park visitors or whether it's tribal members from Red Cliff, where much of the land from that National Lakeshore was taken. It's going to be an interactive web-based platform, 360-degree virtual visits to 12 different ecosystems within the park, interpretive stories, and the website is in the preliminary design phase. They have 60 different interpretive elements drafted, and it should, as I said, be released later this year. So it's nice that we now have some case studies that we can point to say how well the TAM works and how well it works really in any community, especially one where community engagement and cultural revitalization is important. With that, I'd like to say miigwech, miu, bisndaweg. Thank you for listening to us. And I'll stop sharing.
Miigwech, Rob, and Sarah, that was excellent as well. Every time I hear about the climate adaptation menu, it really rings home the importance of what we're all talking about today and what we're trying to do to solve our climate change issues. I will indicate that a number of folks have shared links in the chat, so you might want to take a look. There are several other sort of climate adaptation resources that have been posted there, so that's great, as well as I put a link onto the actual climate adaptation menu. And Jessica will probably say this at the end, but we're compiling resources from the speakers that we will share once we have kind of the presentations all online on the website. So what I'm going to do now, we've had some great questions. Thank you all for putting them in the chat. I'm going to go through a few, kind of read through them, and I'll ask all the panelists to unmute their video. Yeah, great. And Alicia, you all might not want to do that, but you can if you want. We'll see how the connection works. We'll do this for maybe 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes. So then we have time for Seth Eokwa's closing for us. So the first question I'll ask, I'm going right to the Q&As. Let me move this here so you can see my face, is about uncertainty, and that typically uncertainty is responded to with scenario planning and modeling. But when there are multiple frames of knowing, there's an added layer of uncertainty that frames policy issues or other issues. So in response to climate change and adaptive water management and land management, what are some adaptation planning tools and processes that you have seen that work well to integrate traditional ecological knowledge when available to respond to climate change. And some of the questions were like dialogue and reflective spaces, two-eyed seeing, informed process, shared offices, joint monitoring, joint workshops, etc. So I'll just open that up and any presenter can unmute and start to answer.
Maybe I'll start. I think personally, the best information I've got regarding climate change and climate change adaptation was probably like 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, was that there was a lot of workshops occurring with the north of 60 communities and the south of 60 communities. And those workshops with that group of people all getting together and talking and having breakout sessions and learning from each other, I think was probably one of the best learning experiences I've personally had. Just learning, especially with the northern communities, it was very helpful to learn what's happening up north and what we can actually look forward to, or not really look forward to, but what we can expect to experience here. So that was my take on it.
Does anyone else want to unmute and take an answer on this one?
I think that one of the things that helps me when I think about uncertainty is the fact that when you're working with elders and you're working with hunters and gatherers and knowledge holders, you're really working with thousands of years in some cases of accumulated experiential knowledge, really focused on place. And while we can look at some of the science and think, well, there's a lot of uncertainty here, thinking back, the stakes were often quite a lot higher when some of that experiential knowledge was being gathered and tested. And while it wasn't done in a laboratory and it wasn't done maybe according strictly to the scientific method, the goal was really to make sure things continued into future generations. So looking back at that knowledge, I think is one way to help alleviate some of that uncertainty.
Anyone else, or I can move on to the next one? No? Okay, great. Let me see. I can move on if I open up my screen. Okay, so here's another one that I think it kind of dovetails with this. And this is kind of, I'll read the question and then we can see how we answer it. But the question is, are there traditional skills or ways of knowing that can compare to the technological tools used to do things like gauge oxygen levels, water temperature, etc.? And then I added on here, kind of combined some. Can any of the speakers talk about how to do Western science in a good way? And are there things that you do, like maybe put down tobacco within this more Western style research that all of you talked about? So that's kind of how do you actually bring this all together? And are there actual tools and things that you can use when you're doing your work?
Personally, again, for me, I found that working with the elders and the Western equipment really went a long way. And just showing, okay, here's an optional way of looking at temperature, dissolved oxygen, and then learning from them as well. Like, I think at the beginning of your question, you asked, is there a way to just to utilize traditional knowledge instead of using meters? And a lot of our elders still observe the algae and growth, which would indicate, possible low dissolved oxygen levels. it's like the elders don't need that equipment. They see, they know, and now they know that there's an optional way of doing it. And I'm finding that they're finding it interesting. They're asking questions about the equipment. And I think just working together on it is just, it's beautiful.
I think for one thing for us, when we set our temperature loggers, we're not always guaranteed to find them again with currents and wind and all those impacts. So one thing that we do is when we can't find our temperature loggers, we go to the local fishermen, and they have a much better understanding of the currents and the areas that our temperature loggers could be. And most of the time they're right. When we go back and relook, they're exactly where they said that they thought that they would be. Another thing, Alicia and I, we saw that question, so we were kind of brainstorming something we do just for fun. When we test temperature for the water, we all just stick our hands in and we'll say, okay, what does everyone think it is today? So that's, I mean, just one way of practicing. And we're usually within 5 degrees of the temperature. And I mean, it's not necessarily like a great way, but I think it's something that we are almost training ourselves to do all the time. So we can get out of not necessarily using the meter, but having a better idea of when we do stick our hand in the water, when we do get into that environment. So yeah, that was just literally a small example.
And then just to add on to what Debbie said about like the algae and just how the elders will use that to determine the dissolved oxygen. You can also just different plant species that will be there, or if there's invertebrates, some of invertebrates are more tolerant to like lower dissolved oxygen, or some will only prefer a higher dissolved oxygen level. Or even same with like your conductivity and like the total dissolved solids. Like, so just knowing like the species that are there and just getting out and looking and making that like acknowledgement that this is here and this is what the conditions are at this time. And like even the fish species, they'll move in at like into shore at different times and temperatures. So like not just knowing like what time of year it is, you want to know like the temperature and how it is like affects like the fish species. So say for like the larval whitefish, they usually hatch between the 6 degree and 10 degrees. So like you'll start seeing them pop up when the water's at temperature. So you just like know, kind of just being out there and getting out into nature, you'll make those observations as well. And talk to your elders.
Practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit more onto that too, speaking to the research portion. Personally, when I did my master's, I was working with the Menominee Nation, and so that's different from Oneida. And really, when you're going to do research with another community, whether you're tribal or not, it's really important, like people are saying, to talk with the elders and the community members, because respect can look very different in different communities, whether that's laying the tobacco down, or if it's saying a prayer, or even different research parameters. So for my research, I was looking at underground fungi, but when I was talking with community members, there was this real, distinct teaching that the underground community shouldn't be disturbed. So we worked with that knowledge and found a way, me working with the community to figure out a way to still do the research, but in a more respectful way without disturbing the underground community and things like that. So it really is talking to the elders in the community to figure out what those respective protocols can be, and then designing those research parameters and protocols with them as well.
Wow, this is amazing. Thank you all so much, Miigwech. I'm going to ask the final question, and just if we can kind of keep our answers short here, so that in the next 2 to 3 minutes we can go over to Sateokwa. So the final question that I'm going to ask is, what advice would you give non-native scientists or agency folks, university folks? What advice would you give for working in these sacred spaces of science, wisdom, and indigenous cultures?
I guess I could go first on that one. My advice would be to build those relationships early, especially before writing a grants proposal. Build those relationships, have those communities be part of that research proposal process, and all the way through the research, and when you're disseminating the knowledge after the project is done too, and keeping those connections going. I think that's really important. A lot of times with research projects, once the project ends, the relationship kind of fizzles out. But keeping those relationships going, I think, is really important, especially if you want to do future research again with those communities.
And I guess from a non-native perspective, a non-tribal member perspective, one of the things that we need to remember is that if we're doing things in a good way, we are going to feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. All of the stuff that we bring with us and that baggage that we bring with us, you have to put that aside because you're working in someone else's space and someone else's culture. And if you feel uncomfortable, it means you're doing it right.
I don't really have much to add, but I just do quickly want to add that for the past while that I've been with Pace Plat, all of our partnerships with non-native groups have been positive, respectful, and honest. And I think that goes a long way with honesty and respectfulness on both sides, and be patient with each other. We're still learning, and together we'll make sure that Mother Earth, Turtle Island's looked after for many, many years to come.
Alicia or Emily, do you want to bring us out, or should we move forward?
I guess we would just agree with Sarah. Building those relationships, I think, is one of the hardest things. For myself, I didn't grow up on the reserve. I just moved home within the last 5 years. And even building my own relationships within my own community has been a journey for me. So I think, especially for outsiders, people coming into communities without that understanding, I think that could definitely be much harder. So it's, definitely about being respectful and knowing that you're somewhere else, or if it is your own land, to know that you don't know it all, and to just be open to learning.
Chimugwich, everybody, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I would now turn it back over to Jessica Koski.
Miigwech, to all of the speakers today for taking the time to share with us, and for the important work that you all are doing. Emily, Alicia, Debbie, Sarah, and Rob. There were so many pieces of wisdom for how to respectfully engage in relationship building and empowering Indigenous communities, and traditional knowledge in monitoring and climate adaptation initiatives. As we close out the series here, I also want to say Miigwech, thank you to the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities American Indian Studies Department for your partnership with the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement Annex 10 TEK task team and co-hosting the series, especially Professor Mike Dockery for your important role as moderator, and Christina and Wesley for technical and organizing support throughout the series. Miigwech to my co-organizers, Andrew Preston and Jessica Dolan, for all of your enthusiasm, commitment, and weekly and daily support for planning, communications, and bringing the series to fruition. Jessica Dolan for additionally organizing and moderating one of the sessions and supporting the weekly Q&A live feed. Miigwech to additional TK task team members, many who served as guest speakers and supported connections during the process, and Jessica Jock with the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe for organizing one of the sessions, and Albany Jacobson Eckert with the BIA, who assisted with some registration, especially early on, and the communications throughout. And we want to express appreciation to all of the presenters, a part of this 6-part series, and to all of the attendees for your interest and involvement. And last but certainly not least, Miigwech, thank you to Satiokwa Bucktooth for your contributions throughout the series, for the opening and soon closing address, and additionally serving as a guest speaker and panelist during the June 9th Area of Concern session and the June 23rd Native Plant session last week. Miigwech, big thank you. And so at this time, I will pass it to you, Satiokwa, to conclude the series with a closing address.
Tego gwego sa te o yung gats wa get na sio ako sa seno tikita do tanong chino wa ka te hialo o wani zalate te ka to hunjoni geli wan hodo ne yung bali wa su a jino hoda wa te wa talunyo ji wani ta gwego so gangyokwa so wa ta husio chini gali wesa o han te gali wa te kwa ande wa no hitste jino hot danso wa te wana dunyo Agora com as candidatas foi no ni na quatro Nicola da não tem tino falado na questão a scana a scana de ayung quatro walia ne jaga Antonio dot ni quatro Nicola ona no é no anji do technical hayela da name kidney star hunja ne ji da got kama hage jino hot danso yung gyun hekwa Antonio dot ni quatro Nicola Ona no e no nanji do gela te no na gaso an ne lawelo an ka ne kolonia ke jo hunjate e no ni do etana in bahat na no na in panya data nya te ka sat sta salage de wayan daily ka ne kolonia chikanya dala goa chikanya dala hele chikanya dala tunio chika hiu hadeni ji huada ya o ho jakusio tne ka te kyo hage ji do santa joganola stana jam hominas aska ji ndi do wa no ni na panikola Naili wagi and do what got when gonna hold a don't sala Tonya do ne panikola Neseko chikate galunyo ai do gela te tano kya te kanja gande tun holato ne jiseko te kondo ta hone kahne galunyo tano jiseko yung patsali hakene kahne kio ai tanya do hakne kwat gola ona nanji do gela te ne sungwayan toy ne na kundi sat sta salaga ne hunde so ai ask you to go do ka tosake tanya do hakne kwat gola no na nanji do gela te no paso yo li wake na jini hoyelo jagueko de to lato na no paso na yo na deli honda elon ko di hawitana kanu hok dansala kyotko yo di halakastana yo na data way na da unga ko jate ona ka dina ne entanje tinu holato ne no paso e tonya do ne kwa nigula aska jin di do wa no ni ne kwa nigula dan de tinu holato ne Guatanapsala, Najini, Chisungwan Toina, de Bushnagan, Nagayan Tosala, Jinigali Sohunda, Ohunjaga, de Batawalia, Etony Dot, and Guanicola. No, no, Nanji do Gala, then Nekahisu, and Nesungway, Tiso Gina, the Waga, Desungwawi, Ohunjaga, and then I'm Wayat the Genha. Nayotsunonia Giseko de what Gatos Gunda de Wanio got you Hundessa, Gahata, Gehasa, is at the notness kind of Guatalano, Etony Dot, near Guanicola. Oscar Jin did work with Nuni now, Guat Nicola, done not datum, Dayatino Holado, Negundelio, Etonia dot, near Guat Nicola. Na Dayatino Holado, now Guilla so, your Nyoda, ne cat the Gaguila gate, you know what dancer, and at the Lihun, then a cat the Gayandage. Okay, get to know any do what the lock over who stuck with an okay, your Yantonio. Oscar Jin did work with Nuni now, Guat Nicola, done not Dayatino Holado, no, Guilla so, Etonia dot, near Guat Nicola. Oscar Jin did wa hwe nuni na kwa Nicola da no de tinu holada no chitangu chiseko ingwa tunde kalania skundi hawi Antonio dog ni kwa Nicola no na nanji do gela de ja do santo no e tatian takwa na inki sotuku ala ladiwelas na do ni nakala wanyas no na ala dunda yam halele da hati ne ka hawi ne asa sununi chika Nicolunio Antonio dog ni kwa Nicola Oscar did wa hwe nuni na kwa Nicola da no de tinu holada na ka yele ni ka welaga chiseko ladiwela lasta jihunjada Hunjate, Antonio Dog ni Guat Nigula. Onagati, Enagananji do a gala de, Chikalhia de Nua Loli Wadoga, Nua de Haya Yapusness and Guachi Gilkana Kalapa. De Hoswateto da not look Dalihato Gio Hunjate, Oscachin di Dua Nuni dan Chidona Holadanes and Guachi Gilkana Kalapa. Antonio Dog ni Guat Nigula. Neji Nanjiduile. Oscajin di doa hwet nuni na guan ingola da not de tunu holado ne asunta neso e nua ge gonsalagis ne imki sota galakwa e tonia dog ne guan ingola ona da tinu holado ne gisto kwat so ne asunta neso yatikas yakudia na waza da not yagal kya da salonia dakwa ne imki sota galakwa oni jita hodiswa te don da no lo aweasta neskana jagadun hatani jinu hoda sungwantoi e tonia dog ne guan ingola Skajin di dua hwet nuni na guat Nicola da not de tinu holado, nejini gayan lo wadeli hunda Nicola la nega wajila gelo. Na dosa teno hana da la swaksa huana da wayado ne junkia hialakwa. Onagati de tinu holado ne gayeli ni umwediga hetonia dot ni guat Nicola. Wana nua nua ya ti dawa wana ni hala na na jinua tata de nak dalagwani na singwai dizo. Agwe ko nua ni kya wena ne kasa stasila so a da agwe ko da hot kam ha ke jino hota na skana I don't know the new ke jini kali was on jacket in patwani. Andi to wata way ando nua and the wata wana ya la de easy na kalonya di wa hi andi to wat ka when kan hola don't sala. Tonya dog ne kwani gula. Ona ya heta wa wena yo hele on ze deli. On ze geli wan hodu jino hot danso with the one at dunyo yaki te wat ni go honi daga no hot that's and get ni go ha jiza wa that's a get ne ona wat wali wan dak one jiza wat got we kana hola don't sala e tony dot ne wat ni gola. So I went through and did a quick closing for us. I hope that everybody learned something from the matters that we covered today. And I basically went through and acknowledged everything that is here on earth that sustains us. It also helps remind us that even though we all come from different areas of the earth, we have different priorities in life, we have different things that our mind is concerned with, you know, whether it be climate change or trying to get, you know, the kids ready for school or babysitters, you know, our minds are always all over the place. So this is done before and after meetings and to start the day and to end the day. So it kind of brings our minds together. So we're all present. Our minds are all as one. And we acknowledge everything, starting even with the people, our Mother Earth, our different waters, our gardens, our berries, our fish, our trees, our animals, the birds, that they continue to sing and they bring us joy, up into the sky where the sun, our brother the sun, helps give us heat and light. Our grandmother the moon, that she still shines every night and she helps guide our future generations to the earth. Our stars, that they continue to mark our ways so we never get lost. The four beings, the thunders, the four winds, and our creator. And it just helps remind us to be present and to acknowledge and be grateful for everything out there that helps sustain our lives. So Nyama Goa, I hope everybody learned something. It was such a great session and I really appreciate the team that helped put this all together. Nyama Goa.
Miigwech. And this concludes the Great Lakes Traditional Ecological Knowledge Speaker Series.